Ladies and gentlemen, we will be now beginning with our final session, which is the fireside chat, which we'll be having with Mr. Patu Keswani, the CMD of Lemon Trees. Where the session will be moderated by Mr. Mandeep Lamba, President, HVS Anurag. The session title stands as Hindsight 2020, Looking Back to Forge Ahead. We are awaiting Mr. Keswani to join in a couple of minutes. Mr. Lamba, over to you.
Thanks, Pranay. Thank you very much. Lovely session before this. Some very, very inspiring discussions on how the F&B sector is going to emerge, and very reassuring. Great job. I think it was very, very enjoyable. So well done, Pankaj, and everyone else who was there. We'll wait for Patu to come in and look at hospitality, which obviously has been one of the big sufferers, the hotel sector and travel during the pandemic. We'll just allow Patu to log in.
So we can start whenever you like. Yep.
Yeah, we can start. So great to catch up with you, Patu, as always. You know, one of the things I keep telling a lot of people is that every, once in a month or once in 2 months, I love to catch up with you because you have such a great perspective. You know, it's always a pleasure to catch up with you, Patu. You have such a wonderful perspective on the industry, and you always have a take which is very different from a lot of takes that I keep hearing. So I enjoy my sessions with you tremendously, and you're probably aware of that. So here's a great opportunity to sort of share your perspective with a larger audience. So let's start with a simple thing that, we are all aware of the pandemic, and, that we've been devastated with this, the sector specifically. But just to do a quick overview, Patu, on where we were in, let's say, March, April 2020, and where are you right now in almost the middle of February, about 8-10 months down, almost 10 months, 11 months down. Have things changed a little from where we were, and where exactly is your outlook at this moment in time?
So if you look at, March was both good and bad because, as you know, the pandemic impact hit us really mid-March. So if I look at the 2.5 months before, say, mid-March, I won't talk specifically about Lemon Tree. I can just say we were doing phenomenally well. Then I'll talk about India. India was doing about, I would reckon, it's the best quarter. So it was doing about, we have 150,000 rooms. I reckon India was doing 115 to 120. That was the consumption of rooms. And because it was such high occupancies, ARRs were also high for all segments. Once this pandemic came, I know that in March, our occupancy in February was 80%. In March, it averaged out to 44. Okay, that was the impact, and it was so instant and so sudden. Now, as you know, I don't know how many people who are outside of the hotel industry realize that when consumption comes down, prices come down. So it's a double whammy in both sides. The better you do, the higher the price. The lower the demand, the lower the price. And our sector is extremely irrational. There are so many individual players in it who, because our costs are fixed, will keep dropping price in order to get some revenue. And therefore, there is a fundamental irrationality in our market, which is because it is so fragmented, it is not consolidated. So in April, I remember I spoke to 1 or 2 people and I discovered that the total demand in India was 12,000 rooms. So here's the number: 120,000 rooms 3 months before and 12,000 3 months later. Obviously, the inventory is the same, but a large amount of inventory, I think I was told up to 1 lakh rooms were temporarily shut. So basically, 2/3 of the supply was off and 90% of the demand was off. Pricing was, of course, less than half of what it should have been. So what I discovered was that in April, May, June, 90% of that little business that we had was what I call COVID related. So actually what we did is segmentation. What is COVID related and what is normal business? So 90% of 10% of our occupancy, of India occupancy, was COVID related. So actually, effectively, your traditional demand had dropped by 99% or 98%. So that was the backdrop. April, May, June equally bad, lockdowns and so on. So our revenue broadly was, see, we did a revenue in January, February of a little under 2 crores a day, 1.9, 1.8. In April, May, June, we did 44 lakhs a day, which is 25% of that revenue, which meant actually we were doing very well in occupancy because we got a lot of COVID guys.
Correct.
Next quarter, we did, I think, 50 lakhs a day, when traditionally we would have done maybe 1.5 crores. So our revenue was maybe 28-30% of an equivalent quarter 1 year ago. So from 25% revenue, we went to 35% revenue quarter comparison previous year. What I found encouraging, actually my big fear, Mandeep, was that COVID business was going to go, obviously. So the non-COVID, or what we would call traditional business, would it catch up? Or would actually performance deteriorate as COVID business came down? Fortunately, traditional business picked up, and as I'm sure you know, it was mostly retail. So for the wider audience, they should know the way at least Lemon Tree looks at business is, and we, since we are in 50 cities and we have 8,000 plus rooms, we can be a broad proxy. Not exact, but a broad proxy. So here's what I found. That Lemon Tree traditionally, 10% of its business was foreigners. That became 0. Of the other 90%, 40 out of that 90 was what we call retail, which is through online or through your call centers or direct bookings with you. Of the remaining 50, about 25 to about 20 was, I will call, SMEs, MSMEs, which are the small companies that don't have a national contract with you. Another 20 is the large companies who have, contracts with you across 40, 50 hotels. And the last 10 was MICE, which is meetings, incentives, weddings, and so on. So if I look at this stack, initially, of course, everything was 0. The only thing that was coming was a little bit of retail. Now what I find is retail has bounced back 100%. So that 40, which we had traditionally out of 100 rooms sold, we are today doing 44. In fact, we are doing 10% better than pre-COVID, but at very low rates because everybody has dropped prices. MSMEs, which is normally 20% of our business, is now 10, which means half has come back. Large corporates, out of the 20, 2 has come back. Meetings, incentives, conferences, out of 10, maybe 3 has come back because, of COVID restrictions and no large events. Foreigners is 0. So if you just do a quick waterfall, 44 plus 10, 54 plus, another 5, say, 60. We are at 60 now and roughly at 70% of pricing. So therefore, our revenue should be at 40% of the previous quarter broadly, of the previous equivalent quarter, not the last quarter. So from a secular trend basis, our revenue is growing nicely. My expectation is very simple. It is that first, we must have occupancy growth before price growth. So my guess is that by middle of this year, assuming vaccination goes at a higher rate than it is today, it's too little, MSME will come back fully, large corporates will come back at least 50%, and from October onwards, I estimate that meetings, incentives will also be back full. Foreigners might take another year, year and a half, because it depends on global vaccination and, travel bubbles and so on. I don't know about that, but I would reckon that 90% of our traditional business, which is excluding foreigners, should be back in another 7 to 8 months. That's point one. When will pricing come? Pricing will come 6 months after that, because you have to see a sustained recovery and no jhatkas in between. What else do I see happening? I see on a permanent basis of the large corporates, which is roughly 20% of our business, 1/4 of it perhaps disappearing for good because of work from home or more Zoom meetings, less travel maybe. So 5% of overall demand will be destroyed on a permanent basis, but supply, I reckon, will be 15%. you are in the best position. You should tell all me and all of us, what do you think will happen to supply? Because NPAs will start from the end of March. So there will be people probably selling out, repurposing, shutting down, converting, I don't know. But there will certainly be some level of supply disruption, of which a large part may be permanent. Third point I would make is broadly pre-COVID, we were growing in branded room demand. And you know this very well. We were growing at about 11% a year, secular. Supply was growing at 14, 15, 16. That's why, for 10 years, the industry was facing this demand supply imbalance. The good news is, I reckon now supply will be completely constrained, other than those projects that were nearly complete before COVID. Demand, that 11% will come back from next year. So if I again do a waterfall of demand, 5% permanent reduction, 10% due to foreigners. So end of this year, we should be at 85% of pre-COVID demand. Next year, with 10% and 10%, 10% growth, 10%, we should exceed pre-COVID demand. So I'm an optimist. Broad guess, I think the financial year 23 will see sustained price and occupancy recovery. And 24, 25 will be golden years because no supply will come. So broadly, this year, coming year, we will catch up to 85%. On revenue terms, I would reckon 70 because there will be a price impact. Next year, full pre-COVID, maybe a little better. Financial year 24 and 25. I think the surviving chains, they will have massive margin expansion.
So great summary, Patu. It couldn't have been better. We did a report, I think sometime in June or July, on how we thought that this would play out. And what we're seeing largely is in line with what you're also concurring, is that we felt that occupancy in its entirety at pre-COVID levels will come back in 22, and rates will come back pre-COVID levels in 23, is really what we felt. And you're absolutely
right. You have been a hotelier and you've run a chain.
Right.
If there is confidence in demand recovery, I don't think it'll take 1 year for rates to come back. Because keep in mind, how much is your contracted rate business? 30%?
Right. Correct.
70 is more dynamic or more short term. That will come back instantly. In fact, with a vengeance.
Correct. So I think the challenge, I think, Patu, is more in the international travelers, which are for the luxury market, where they are dependent almost 40 to 50% on that market. That is where the challenge is going to be, and it will be difficult to fill the luxury demand through domestic demand.
I'm not very sure. That's a function of pricing. Today, as you know, luxury players are pricing at mid-segment pricing.
Correct.
Mid-segment has gone to economy pricing.
Correct.
And the independent small hotelier has got massacred, unfortunately.
Sadly.
Right. So my guess is pricing may come back a little earlier, even if we are conservative. Now the question is, will it come back end of this year? Maybe. Who knows? Certain micro markets, I'm sure, will come back.
No, they will. Where micro market where the demand is going, they have to come back. And I think clearly, Patu, like you said, this time the disruption is more an issue of demand and less an issue of supply. We're not going to see too much supply coming into the market in a hurry. And that is where I see a very significant rebound for the industry, and of course for the larger chains which managed to survive this. Of course, there's going to be some collateral damage for sure as we go forward, and I think there will be some consolidation of some buying and mergers and acquisitions, etc. will happen. But clearly, this is not a supply problem as we've seen earlier. Where the larger issue was supply, and we had such a large influx of supply coming in that demand just couldn't catch up. This time around, that's not the issue. So thankfully, the industry should recover a lot quicker than it has in sort of past disruptions. Very interesting, what you're saying and the confidence that you're bringing. That I think not to in any way undermine the sort of severe pain that the sector, including I'm sure your own company, has gone through. But I think we're all looking at the silver lining of it bouncing back. One of the things, Patu, that I wanted to ask you in your experience with dealing with this is, what do you think are going to be some of the temporary changes, and what do you think are going to be some of the absolute permanent changes, both in terms of business and product as well? Like you mentioned, that you see that permanently some bit of corporate business will definitely shrink. Do you see some other trends that are likely to happen as a result of this disruption that has taken place?
So, see, like some demand destruction is permanent, some is short term. There will be similar events in, say, the cost side. So one is revenue side, one is cost side. So what I find interesting is, very quickly, is that we reckon that, see, if I look at last year, our net EBITDA was 30% and our revenue was 100, expenses 70. Now, let's talk about today. There has been an enormous compression in our expenditure, reduction. I look at costs from three perspectives. One is cutting of flab, where the curse of success is that you take your eye off that. So that flab is gone. Second is deferring of costs. So like renovation, we normally renovate 1/6 of our inventory every year. So we have a 6-year cycle to refresh. This year in this financial year, we deferred that. My broad perspective, Mandeep, was let's treat this as a gap year. In this year, it's as if nothing happened, but a lot of money went from your balance sheet because you had to keep your business. Excuse me. You had to keep your business running. So there was a loss of muscle in the balance sheet. So what you needed to ensure was there was enough liquidity to meet your minimum expenses. Sorry. And pay all the staff and so on. Because this is the year that you should not do any firing. Because this is the, if your staff have any need, it wasn't this year.
Correct.
And so if you are a company that wants to stick to its brand and core values, the last thing you should do is lay off people. So we said we won't lay off anybody. In fact, we said we will pay even our small vendors earlier than normal, because they will also otherwise get destroyed, because it's the small guy who gets killed. So basically, when we looked at costs, we looked at it in three levels. One is permanent reduction, which I discussed, was flab and manpower efficiencies. Interestingly, our staff to room ratio, which was 1, we now reckon going forward will drop to 0.75. So it's an enormous saving. Power and fuel. We found there were, little tinkering that we did with the chill water temperature for air conditioning, hot water boiler timings, pressure of water through our pumps. And we found we could permanently reduce about 10% of our power expenses. Plus, we decided to go green. So last year, 5% of our total consumption of energy was renewable. This year, it will be 32%. So we really actually used this opportunity to do a lot of stuff we wanted to. All put together, we reckon there'll be a 20% savings in our power and fuel expenses and another 20% in our staff expenses, which you can imagine is enormous. In and of itself, it is 7% of our revenue, which we split now to EBITDA. Then there is deferment of costs, which we've done. And last is cutting of muscle. So cutting of muscle, I think all hotels have done. They have deliberately opted to remove amenities, perhaps raise temperatures of air conditioning, because the question was cutting your suit, your cloth to get a suit out of it. That will all is coming back. So we have said, you can turn a Nelson's eye to those small complaints, which normally we don't. But those improvements in quality are already back in our system. So permanent cost savings, I reckon, for us will be about a minimum 7 going up to 10% of our revenue. So if normally my EBITDA was 32%, then on the same revenue basis, it will become 42 now.
So that's, I think, the one absolute brilliant silver lining that this pandemic has brought to everyone that I speak to, all the hotel companies and owners. Everybody is sort of speaking the same language, Patu. It may be marginally different in terms of percentages, but definitely the industry's average sort of profitability is going to go up significantly post this pandemic. I think that seems to be the one very, very significant corollary which is coming out of here. We spoke about costs, the operating costs. Patu, do you think that there will be some rethink on the way we build hotels in the future? Are you seeing some changes in terms of front desk and all the people that we employ and other sort of services? Are you looking at
No,
any?
I'm not seeing that, Mandeep. What I am seeing is there will be certainly some permanent improvements in hygiene. In all our SOPs, we will put health and safety as a #1 priority in our core values, as an example. Okay, so these will happen, but I reckon based on what's happened in the past century, in the last 4 or 5 pandemics and epidemics, everything came back to normal in 3 years. It's human nature, to socialize, to travel, to interact. So masks and sanitizers and contactless and all that, a lot of it, most of it will go out of the window. What I do see happening is a movement towards digitalization of operations. Contactless from a not so much a hygiene, but from a learnings perspective that look, it can save manpower costs.
Correct.
But there is a trade-off between that and the warmth of human service delivery. So we've done a bit of it. I reckon we'll continue it. So we will now look at digitalization, which is, whether it's customer outreach or operational efficiency, with a lot more interest. We have set up an internal team, a core team to evaluate, AI, machine learning, robotics. What can we do as a company in the next 2 years? So there will be some changes. But let me put it this way, there will be always a trade-off between efficiency and human delivery. And Indians want human delivery. I also predict that the large 5-star chains who were used to serving mostly foreigners, or a large number, will focus a lot more now from a risk mitigation perspective on domestic, which means I see a growth in demand among domestic travelers across segments, because as you know, the more attention the supply side pays to the demand side, in fact, the better the demand does. So that's the good news I see.
Correct. Tell me something, Patu. We are grossly, as we've realized, and we've known this for a while, but almost everybody wanted to focus their attention on the key corporate cities, commercial cities. Do you think that we will see a significant increase in our leisure inventory, which is fairly underserved? Is that a trend that you're likely to see?
Definitely, and in tier 2, tier 3. Because let me share something amusing with you. Since we started managing hotels a few years ago, we now have 40 hotels in our managed inventory. And most of them are not in the tier 1s or metros where we have owned inventory. I'm amazed at their performance. Because they have traditionally not been eyed by branded chains. They have a lot. So all the branded chains are heavily concentrated in metros and the large tier 1s. In the tier 2, tier 3, there are these smaller hotels/chains. Their ARRs are better than ours here.
Yeah.
Okay, because there's no competition. They are, I don't know about the efficiency and the service levels and so on, but certainly the ARRs are very interesting. And the hotels we manage, many of them, the ARRs are unbelievable.
Yeah, that's
so
true.
What I'm saying is that our next thrust is to get there. And I think, or I would say any chain that is evaluating it, there's no doubt, go there.
So a pointed question from this that would you be keen to acquire something which has a portfolio and is interesting in terms of what you just spoke in leisure?
See, my big problem, Mandeep, is that as owner, we own the largest inventory of hotels and rooms outside the Taj. I mean, we own over 5,000 rooms. We are building another nearly 1,000 rooms. So there is a limit to asset ownership because that is actually the low end side of the business in terms of return.
Right.
So our intent is actually to sell assets and recycle the cash into higher ROCE businesses.
Right.
My other problem is unlike the other hotel chains, all our inventory is new. So you take the book value of a traditional hotel chain and the hotel is 30 years old and compare that same hotel with a new hotel I put up 2 years ago. My book value is twice or thrice a 5-star.
Correct.
So my return on capital is also therefore that much lower. So what's my view? My view is we are open to acquisitions which are fundamentally capitalized, or we will talk to some funds which have been discussing with us and use them as the funders, but we will be asset light. So we are very open to acquisition, but the acquisition must be without cash. No roadmap.
You've been there, done that. Which leads me to my next question, actually, Patu. You've been an entrepreneur in this sector now for almost 20 years, and there's been a huge learning. You've been through a huge learning curve setting up one of the country's youngest and perhaps one of its best performing, businesses in the hospitality sector, at least in terms of the mid scale. You've raised capital through, early angel investors and then private equity, and then you've done your capital raise through the capital markets. What, in your view, having been there, done that, is the sector can do to make this business a lot sexier than what it is, considering that it still sits at the bottom of the real estate asset class when it comes to institutional investors looking at investing, despite the fact that India is grossly undersupplied and we have fabulous potential. Are there some thoughts around this on what the industry or the sector needs to do?
See, I reviewed this actually from a demand side. So here's the deal, Mandeep. We are very early in the hotel demand cycle. If you look at India, it has two parts. One is agricultural, where half the population resides, but 1/7 our GDP. Then the other half of India, which is, well, 2/3 of which is urban, where the services manufacturing sector, self-employed sectors reside, where it's 85% of India's GDP. These guys are the targets to consume hotel rooms. But if you further segment that, then really only 10% of India, 130 million people, 35 million households, are actual consumers of branded hotel rooms. Otherwise, they all go and stay in those chota guest houses at 800 bucks. When will that change? So really, when we talk of penetration, we are 10% anyway in even the real economy. So in that sense, we don't have lesser hotel rooms. We have lesser demand in the population side. So it's a demand issue, not a supply issue.
The per capita issue.
Correct. So they're only 10% of the guys over $3,500 per capita. Yeah. They are the guys who can buy hotels. I mean, hotels like mine. So my point is that when the GDP doubles in India, typically this segment grows 6x.
Okay.
So it will take another 5-7 years when demand will shoot through the roof, as happened in China at an inflection point of $4,000 per capita country.
Right.
We are at 2,000. So we are not underpenetrated, in my opinion. The real problem in India is that because a lot of black money went into building of hotels, the earlier hotels, which were individually owned, they were irrational investors, irrational pricing. I feel that hotel management companies have done a disservice to Indian owners by not focusing on ROCE. They don't look at return on capital employed, they look at EBITDA. So there is a lack of alignment, a perversion of incentives, in my opinion. Until owners drive that, there will be no price change. Until there is no price change, the markets will not reward our sector. Take me, for example. My real problem is that the investment I make per room and the revenue I get per room, there is still a disconnect. Because the Indian customer doesn't want to pay.
Correct.
So that's the issue.
Right. It's an interesting take on what you say, and I tend to agree that it is the issue of the GDP of the country reaching that level where you'll suddenly start the inflection of demand. That's a very, very valid point. I think we're coming to a close of our time. I have two very quick questions for you before we end. One is, Patu, on the revenue side, we're seeing a lot of the ancillary revenues sort of focus from hotels. do you think this will go beyond the F&B extension, and is this going to become a reasonably significant focus permanently going forward?
See, I know that from what little I know, personally, Taj ka cumin I tried. It's a fabulous, I mean, I'm hats off to them. Now, will demand for that continue when things open out? I don't know how much takeout demand will continue. I don't think people will want to sit at home and order takeaway. That is an artificial demand buildup. So while it may continue, it should be at much lower levels. And people, if they want to eat, will go to the Taj and sit in the hotel and eat rather than order the food from there. So that's point one. But broadly, I reckon that F&B, high value, quality F&B outside of the hotel, delivery of that will be a significant revenue generator for some hotel chains. Not for us. We are not focused on that anyway. So we haven't done any of it. But maybe for the Taj, perhaps even for the Oberoi and ITC, I don't know the numbers, but it will be, I reckon, a part of their business model going forward.
Interesting. Lastly, Patu, if I was to just ask you on what are your, couple of key learnings from the pandemic, and if given that if you were to face a similar disruption in the future, what would you look to? How would you look to deal with that from the learnings of this pandemic?
See, I'm the highest growth asset company in India, so I am in capex mode. So I have a lot of debt which just got operationalized. So one learning I have is that I will strategically look to reduce debt from our balance sheet to 0 in 5 years. I'm very clear. We have about 70 crores of debt. It has to be 0.
Fabulous.
Number 2 is I will always keep enough cash on my books. And yes, people may complain that, listen, if you have, let's take a number, 200 crores of cash on your books, and you're earning 4% liquid or 3%, you're not rewarding, you're not maximizing return, but I'll say it's actually a risk mitigation strategy. So I don't look at it from a return perspective. I look at it from a risk return trade-off for the whole company. So I would build a sufficient liquidity cushion. I would write down all my debt as quickly as I can. I would also look at recycling cash because of the large number of assets we own. And I think the last is that I would revisit my risk management framework. So we have a very complicated document, a risk management framework. Unfortunately, a pandemic, we have very little control over. But now I will increase the likelihood of such an event and then track it against impact. So in our risk management framework is likelihood versus impact, speed, and our mitigatability. So mitigatability, as I said, is remove debt, keep cash. Speed, it's instant. That's what we've seen. Likelihood, which used to be very low, now I will put in the medium category. And impact, I will put as extreme. So when you look at the framework from that perspective, your entire response becomes fundamentally a little different. So that's what we will do.
Amazing, Patu. Looking at writing your debt down to 0, it's an amazing, thought. And I think you're largely going to do it by monetizing some of the assets that you own, I presume. And you're going to become a reasonably asset-light sort of company going forward, learning from what's happened from the pandemic, that debt can cause the sort of most significant damage to you when you're in the growth mode. Great speaking with you as always, Patu. It's always a pleasure. There's so much to learn. I wish we could continue, but we've sort of actually exceeded some of the time that was allocated to us. Stay well, Patu. All the very best. And I'm sure we'll get an opportunity to speak to you again.
Yep. Take care.
Bye for now.
Thanks. Bye.
Thank you, Mr. Keswani and Mr. Lamba, for that excellent session.